Thank you very much, Maya, and greetings, delegates. I'm joined by yet another past president, Sept Dhaliwal. We are here on the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and it's a real thrill to be here. Maya, constituent Maya, thank you very much for the introduction, and to Brian, welcome to the next person in line to be a past president of UBCM. That will be many in a row. I saw Arjun was up earlier on, and I want to just pay tribute to UBCM for going through this extraordinary experience virtually. I understand that the Spanish flu and 2 world wars did not stop UBCM from meeting, and we can add COVID-19 to that as well. It's a real testament to the importance of UBCM bringing municipalities together, leaders from communities as diverse as Vanderhoof and Fort St. James and down in the Kootenays, onto the island, into the Caribou and up into the Peace, all coming together to find best practices, to talk about the challenges your communities are facing, and of course engage as part of this process with your provincial government and provincial leaders in this instance, to hear from us what we believe is the best way forward during these most challenging of times. Obviously, no one expected at the beginning of 2020 we would be in the midst of a global pandemic. I certainly did not. But over the past number of months, I've been working tirelessly with my colleagues to make sure that we are connecting with you in your communities to hear the challenges that you're facing. Selena Robinson has been absolutely superlative in her ability to connect with people over the past number of months. I know I participated in a number of Zoom calls and conference calls with delegates that are assembled here today in your communities, making sure that we were connected and on top of the issues as they were emerging where you live. But before we get into the here and now, I'd like to go back a few years to 2017 when I had the honor to be sworn in as the 36th Premier, not President, 36th Premier of British Columbia. My view at that time was that local government was the catalyst for change within our political structures. All orders of government working together, focused on the needs of people. No one in our structures, whether it be federal or provincial, has the same hands-on contact with voters and community that you do as municipal leaders. And it's been my view as a leader of the opposition and as a garden variety MLA when I was first elected, that if we're not listening to the voices in our communities, we're not connecting with people. So I made it my business when I became Premier to appoint Selena Robinson to not just be the Minister of Municipal Affairs, but also the Minister of Housing, the biggest challenge we have in communities right across the province, big communities, small communities, rural communities, urban communities. Housing is a huge challenge pre-pandemic. It continues to be a huge challenge. So having a minister that's connecting with communities and hearing their challenges and also being able to deliver on the housing side was critically important in my mind. And when it comes to the large urban center here in Vancouver, the importance of public transit is just obvious to anyone who lives in and around our major metropolitan center. So having Selena responsible for TransLink was also, in my opinion, a way to bring together the various tools that our government has, or this order of government, the provincial government has, to meet the needs of your communities. And I believe Selena's done a spectacular job of making sure that your issues come to the cabinet table and that we're able to address them as quickly as we can. And that relationship building doesn't just happen with the minister responsible. I've made it my business to travel to communities around BC. I know I first met Brian sitting in the Vanderhoof Council chambers, not once, but twice, talking about the challenges in Vanderhoof. It was a meeting just earlier this year. I was up to see the sturgeon hatchery. Jerry Thiessen and I and Brian went for a tour. Jerry took the opportunity to say, well, while you're here, can I bend your ear a little bit on healthcare? The next thing I knew, I was up at the healthcare center talking with some doctors. They came in on a Sunday afternoon to have a quick conversation about the challenges the community was facing when it came to primary healthcare delivery. That conversation led to a discussion with Minister Adrian Dix and action being taken to ensure that there's a primary care network in Vanderhoof to meet the needs of the community there. It wasn't a structured meeting. It wasn't planned. It was part of a relationship building exercise. Similarly, with Mayor Carol Leclerc in Terrace, and also Mayor Lee Brain out in Prince Rupert, a discussion with Carol about the challenges of healthcare in Terrace as a hub for the region and the Northwest led me to a discussion about the lack of infrastructure resources at the municipal level. That led to discussions with Carol James, the Minister of Finance, and a $100 million grant program for communities in the Northwest, stretching all the way to Prince George and beyond to Valemount, so that we could give some seed money to municipalities so that they could be full participants in infrastructure programs as they became available. These were not structured requests from government, from orders of government. It was a casual conversation that demonstrated a need that led to the policy work back in Victoria to deliver for people in the Northwest. And we've been trying to do that in every corner of the province, whether it be in the Kootenays, in my home on Vancouver Island, where, as I've already mentioned, Maya Tate is a constituent of mine, or in the major metropolitan centre where Sav is a councillor in Burnaby. So my focus and my challenge, of course, has been how do we balance all of the needs of municipalities, big and small, in every corner of the province. I don't have members of the legislature in every community, but there are mayors and councils in every community. Mayor Story in Fraser Lake. I'd never stopped in Fraser Lake, and a persistent councillor and then mayor led to a visit to Fraser Lake, which was spectacular. I had an opportunity with the mayor to go around and see and meet people, discuss their challenges, discuss their concerns. This is all, of course, pre-pandemic, but it laid the groundwork for when the pandemic struck. I had relationships with people around the province. They weren't just because of our positions, they were because we were human beings, all coming to public life with one focus, regardless of our political perspective, and that was to lift up our communities, to make British Columbia stronger and better because of our efforts, listening to people and dialing in on their problems. So I see UBCM as a great opportunity to have those dialogues. I know year after year, it seems like speed dating. You have your 15 minutes with the minister. And I want to tell you, as a former public servant, this is critically important to the professional public service, because the work that they do to prepare for those meetings that you've been having is work that allows the minister and the system in Victoria to better understand the challenges and build in policies that will work for everybody, regardless of where you live. That's why I think UBCM is so powerful. That's why I think UBCM is so important. And I'm delighted to have the opportunity to sit with Sav and have a conversation about some of the issues that are on the horizon. But before I get there, I want to say that one of my major regrets about the pandemic, and they are many, is that we weren't able to have here in Vancouver this year Firefighting 101. I was very excited to see if Mayor Mike Hurley still had it in him to go into a burning building, even if it was a simulation. So my major regret, Sav, you can take that back to your council table, is I didn't get to see Mike Hurley in full gear running into a simulation of a burning building. But that's a minor regret to all of the challenges that we face in our communities. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have, Sav, and continue this dialogue for the next 20 minutes or so.
Well, thank you very much, Premier. I am Sept Dhaliwal. I'm currently chair of Metro Vancouver. John has mentioned that I am a former president of UBCM. So I want to acknowledge all the work that UBCM continues to do, working with regional districts like ourselves and the local governments. And I also want to acknowledge the work that Mr. Robinson has been doing with us. Very available anytime, and particularly during the COVID period, having the weekly and bi-weekly conversations with us have helped us a lot. I want to start by saying that our province is respected for its response to help keep BC residents safe and laying the groundwork for a robust economic recovery ahead. I want to extend my sincere gratitude, particularly to you, Premier, for your tireless efforts and success in this regard. At the same time, we know the pandemic has exposed areas where our province and region are most vulnerable. In particular, inequities that are not acceptable. As a result, I believe it's critical the government policies at all levels be examined through an equality lens to ensure that our most vulnerable and marginalized residents can access social services, play an active role, benefit from the economic recovery of BC. With that in mind, let's discuss your party's position and commitment to some of the most pressing issues that are facing us all. Local governments throughout the province and across the country, for that matter, are on the front lines, particularly on pandemic response, maintaining critical services level, and such as the delivery of drinking water, in the management of liquid waste and to protect human health, the environment, and playing a key role in important issues such as affordable housing and dealing with homelessness. So I just wanted to ask you, John, how does your party, elected, will intend to support the health and well-being of BC's most vulnerable and underprivileged citizens going forward?
Oh, thank you, Sab, for the question. And I want to put a bit of context around my answer. I want to start by saying that, of course, in March, when Dr. Henry and Minister Dix came to me and said, here's the evidence that there is a virus unleashed within the global community, and it is coming to North America, it is coming to British Columbia, we need to have a plan in place. Dr. Henry laid out, with her expertise and understanding of these issues, the challenges that we would face in the short, medium, and long term. And so we immediately set out to determine how could we make sure that the most vulnerable in our communities had the protections that they need. When Dr. Henry said that physical distancing was the best tool that we had, and Sav and I are a long way apart today. I'm reaching out, Sav, you're not coming back to me, thanks, man. We have to keep physical distance. That has a profound impact on shelter beds in our major urban centers as well as in our smaller communities. So the ability to put a lot of people in confined spaces at certain times of the year when the weather gets difficult, and those that are living rough in our communities across BC are looking to come indoors. That challenge was profound in the end of the summer and at the end of the spring, and has, over the course of the summer, seen significant encampments growing, not just in our urban centers, but in smaller communities around British Columbia. We've tried to work with BC Housing to make sure that we're working with your councils to get approvals to put housing in place as quickly as we possibly can. We've had good progress in some communities like Victoria and other parts of the province to get that housing up, Nanaimo, Terrace, Kelowna, but we have so much more to do. The pandemic has declared for us quite graphically, we have significant challenges of inequality within our communities. We were aware of this before the pandemic. It is graphically before us every day now. That calls upon all of us, federal, provincial, and municipal leaders, to band together to find a way forward. And so what I did for my part is I immediately contacted what's called the Council of the Federation. This is where all of the premiers come together. We usually meet quarterly, and one meeting that's not unlike UBCM, where we gather in person and we talk about the various issues affecting provinces and territories around the country. And I said to the leadership at COF, the Council of Federation, I said, we need to be on this now, each and every day. British Columbia was the first out of the gate, because of Dr. Henry's expertise and vision, to bring this alarm bell and ring it loudly across the country. And within weeks, we saw more and more provinces recognizing, as the case count started to rise, that COVID-19 was here not just for a week, not just for a month, but for a long period of time. That led to weekly meetings, and sometimes twice a week, meetings of the premiers of Canada, as well as the Prime Minister and his team, then Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland. She was at that time the Intergovernmental Minister, now the Minister of Finance. We met to talk about how we could band together and work to make sure British Columbians and Canadians were safe. And I kept saying over and over again, because of the relationships we have with municipal governments here in British Columbia, because of the alarm bell I heard from Jonathan Cote about the profound impact shutting down the economy would have on TransLink and ridership, and the impact on all of our plans to build not just rapid transit in the Lower Mainland, but expand BC Transit to communities around BC. If no one's getting on the bus, if no one's getting on the SkyTrain, fare boxes will be empty, ferries will be empty, costs will continue to go up. We need to keep staff in place. We need to ensure that our infrastructure is there and growing for the next generation. But we're doing that at a time when we're asking British Columbians to go into their homes, to stay away from other people, to shut down their businesses, and then see where we go from there. And I was persistent and relentless with the other premiers. And at the end of the day, we came together with the Prime Minister and had a significant package, the Restart Package for Canada, that included $1 billion of federal provincial money to go directly into public transit, whether it be ferries, TransLink or BC Transit, and another $1 billion of federal-provincial money to share by per capita basis across British Columbia, as well as on a needs basis on grants that are shovel-ready. And that was because we were able to get the attention of all of the premiers and the federal government to work in tandem, which is what UBCM does year after year after year. If we are going to address the inequalities in our communities, we need to do it all levels of government, all hands on deck, all focused with every ounce of our energy on helping people. And I believe the monies that we've been able to secure from Ottawa and that we put into our Safe Start, our Stronger Restart plan here in British Columbia will go a long way to relieving some of the pressures you're feeling about delivering services for people in your communities. Does it address inequality completely? Will it eliminate homelessness? I rather doubt that. But every journey starts with that first step. And we now have resources secured from Ottawa, resources from the province that will be available to you so that you can manage your budgets in 2021 way more effectively than you've been able to do in this most bizarre of years. And if you're able to manage your resources and you have partners in Ottawa and partners in Victoria, we'll be able to put in place programs. We'll be able to build the housing and do the planning with communities that's needed to address these challenges. But when it came upon us suddenly, as it did, we had a significant problem, and that meant that we were going to find the fastest solutions possible. BC Housing worked to provide resources for communities and for others to build quick housing, modular housing. I believe very successful. There are some bumps along the way, and of course, we continue to talk about those challenges. But we have to make sure we're building the housing that people need, and that's been our focus, Sav, quite frankly, and making sure, as we did with income assistance and people with disabilities who are on pensions, we increased those annual or those monthly allowances so that they could ride this out like other people in the economy. And as steps like that, showing compassion to those who are there, but by the grace of God, go any of us, whether it be mental health, whether it be addictions, whether it be homelessness, it's all there to anyone in this province. That's why we have to all be together when we solve these problems.
Well, thank you for that, Premier. So next one is on the infrastructure. Infrastructure is critical to protecting the quality of life and well-being of residents across BC. It provides the services we all depend on and helps keep residents, wildlife, and ecosystems healthy. British Columbians strongly believe that infrastructure investments must be part of our collective plans to build back better from COVID-19, to realize shared objectives, spurring economic growth, addressing climate change, protecting natural habitats, and creating more affordable and inclusive communities. Municipalities manage, own, and operate some 60% of the public infrastructure that drives our economy and the quality of life. Local governments make people's life better, and local solutions have significant regional, provincial, and national impacts. If elected, will your government commit to reassessing the funding model for local governments with a view towards providing long-term, predictable, sustainable funding? And would you also commit to partnering with local governments and to working with Ottawa together, going there if necessary, to garner the federal government's fair share of our critical investments in infrastructure projects?
Thank you, Sab. And of course, we on our last budget, 2020, we had the largest capital spend in raw dollars that British Columbia has ever had. We've been investing in bridges, in transit, in roads, and other infrastructure, not just whether it be active transportation, trails. Our restart plan is focused heavily on trail rehabilitation, using a youth corps, getting younger people out to make sure that the trails we do have are well maintained, and building new trails so that we can continue to take advantage of the splendor that we see behind us here and, of course, in every corner of the province. But the challenge of funding, as I said, when I made reference to the $100 million capital grants to northern communities and then another $50 million in last year's budget, was designed to help smaller communities meet the challenges of aging infrastructure. Lee Brain talks about the challenges in Prince Rupert all the time, and rightly so. Those challenges didn't arrive last year, last month, 2 years ago, 10 years ago. They've been there for a long, long time. Governments need to work together to address massive transformations like that. And when we were talking before the last provincial election, I made a commitment when it came to rapid transit in the Lower Mainland to increase the provincial funding to 40%, encouraging the federal government to do the same thing, which they did. And that relieved pressure on local ratepayers and local municipalities to put in their contribution to meet the needs in our transportation infrastructure. I want to talk also a little bit about hospitals, because that's an area, acute care hospitals, where we have been particularly active. And again, I tip my cap to my colleague Adrian Dix, who not only has been masterful in his ability to get a command and understanding of the challenges and the trends within the COVID-19 world that we're now living in, but also focusing on developing primary care networks across BC, urgent primary care centers in 21 different communities with another 10 committed to next year. That infrastructure is also critical to the well-being of our municipalities. But on the hospital front, I want to talk about Dawson Creek for a minute, because, and this is no disrespect to the sitting MLA and the Mike Bernier, a former city councillor, former mayor, but there was a hospital promised in Dawson Creek year after year, election after election. Dawson Creek does not vote for the New Democratic Party, but Dawson Creek needed a hospital. So we did the planning work. We got a concept plan approved. We got a business plan approved. And there's a hospital that's going to be built in Dawson Creek. Similarly, in Fort St. James, desperate need for a new hospital. It was promised election after election, but there was no concept plan. There was no business plan. There was no money in the budget. Well, now there is. All of that's been accomplished. A hospital's being built in Fort St. James. I believe senior orders of government who have the ability to borrow should be borrowing the money to build the infrastructure that you need to retain people in your communities as they change, as economic winds hit us, not just COVID, but market conditions for resource-based communities often lead to migrations in or migrations out of new populations and old populations leaving. That means you need to have the infrastructure in place. And the ability for us to sign the deal with LNG Canada to have an LNG facility constructed in Kitimat means great news for the community, but it also means big strains on infrastructure. And I believe the federal and provincial governments need to be working with municipalities all the time. I would be delighted to lead a delegation of UBCM representatives to Ottawa to have this discussion. And I will tell you, there will be a very receptive audience at this point in time. Now, Finance Minister Freeland understands explicitly the challenges that municipalities face, and she also understands that delivering services for people involves making sure that your communities have the resources to get the backlog of infrastructure issues dealt with so that you can start planning and preparing for your future communities. That's your job as city councillors and mayors. I want to help you do that. And if it involves more resources from the provincial government, we've demonstrated over the past 3 years that we're prepared to do that. If it involves advocacy with you and others to go to Ottawa, I am absolutely, well, I prefer to do it this way for now. But when the opportunity presents itself for physical traveling to Ottawa, I'm happy to do that. And I believe your question is really the genesis of what I want to see in my government if I have the honor and privilege of being returned as Premier 30 days from now. I want to make sure that the relationships that we build are not there for reasons of just general networking. They're there for an exchange of ideas. What do people need in communities around British Columbia? I'm a born and raised Vancouver Islander. I think, without putting too much pressure on Maya, I think she'll agree that my approach is to try and work with everybody, regardless of where they come from, whether they have issues that I disagree with or whether we have common ground. The best way forward is to listen to each other and then take action. That's what I want to keep doing, and infrastructure is fundamental to that.
Well, thank you very much, Premier. We certainly appreciated the $2 billion package announced last week. It will go a long ways, and we wait very anxiously to how that money is going to and when it's going to get. Next, I will ask about housing, and I think one thing has happened very clearly, that COVID-19 has added urgency to the need to address the shortage of affordable housing. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, we continue to experience high rates of homelessness, with many individuals living on the streets in temporary hotel rooms and short-term accommodations. Wait lists for social housing remain long, and low barrier housing units are required to meet the unique needs of vulnerable populations, including youth aging out of care, Indigenous individuals and families, seniors, people with complex health issues, and women with children fleeing violence. Metro Vancouver is investing $190 million to produce 1,350 new units. Now, If BC Housing, or CMHC, and others came in, we can easily double and maybe even triple those houses. So my point is that local governments are willing to really work with the other two orders of governments. And I know you've already touched on it. So my question to you, Premier, is if your government was elected, what will you do to support an expanded inventory of affordable rental housing in British Columbia?
Well, thank you for that, Sav, and I have touched on it. I apologize for the way I construct my ideas and throw them out there, but this is critical, and it was in 2017, it was in 2018, 2019, and it's even more critical in 2020. As I said, the inability for us to have centers for people to gather close together during a pandemic has led to an increased homelessness count and increased people living rough in our communities right around British Columbia. But we have invested enormous amounts in housing and will continue to invest enormous amounts in housing, and we're going to need to do it with municipalities at our side. You're responsible for land use planning in your communities. You have to deal with the density questions and challenges as you build out those areas where you have opportunities to do so. And we cannot impose upon you our solutions, nor can you wait for us to arrive. We have to come to these points together. And I'm hopeful, again, the federal government has made significant promises about housing, but we haven't seen the dollars arrive. And I don't want to be too petulant about this, because I'm very proud of the work we've been able to do with the current federal government, and they have been very responsive to our needs. This is an extraordinary time, and the list of needs gets longer each and every day. We are not out of the woods yet, not by a long shot. We need a 4-year plan, not a 12-month plan, to address the challenges that we face, whether it be on housing, whether it be on addictions, whether it be on building out those market houses that people want to see. But one area where we have focused, and I think this is important, and it's relevant to Burnaby as well, Sav, and that is student housing. The former government, going back to 2001, refused to allow universities to borrow money to build student housing. And that was an accounting issue. It's not a partisan question. It was an accounting issue. The former government put more emphasis on it. We're putting less emphasis on it, and found a way to allow our public post-secondary institutions to find resources. We're matching this money. We're putting money on the table so that we can build more student housing. That takes pressure off local housing markets, particularly in Burnaby. SFU is leading the way in this regard. In Kamloops, Thompson Rivers is building more housing than ever before, massive amounts compared to what was built in the previous 16 years. So that takes pressure off the existing rental stock, and it provides opportunities to build more rental stock in communities where that's an appropriate expenditure. But the decisions about what communities look like at the end of the day rest, in my opinion, with municipalities. You need partners, you need allies to raise the resources, to have BC Housing has been just fantastic to work with. Everyone talks about Shane Ramsey, and he is outstanding, but the team that he's assembled to meet the needs of communities, large and small, is quite extraordinary. And I have been surprised by many things, Sav, over the past 3.5 years since I've had this privilege to have this job. And what just blows me away each and every day is the commitment of our professional public service, whether it be at the provincial level, at the federal level, or all of the work that staff do for you and council and for UBCM, dedicated to making sure that government is a means for social good. And I know there's a lot of people that are cynical about public life, and I know there's not a person out there today watching this presentation that is not making a sacrifice of one kind or another to serve your community. And I know when we all come together, we tend to focus on that because we're all in the same position. We all put our hands up and said, we'd like to do this. And so, you ask for it, you're going to get it. Fair enough. But I am so profoundly moved by those that say, I would like to involve myself in public life, whether it be as an elected representative or working as a public official at any order of government. It's that commitment to community that we're all here for. And I firmly believe that the housing challenges that were so profound in 2017, we've made some progress. The number of units, I don't have off the top of my head, but Selena could get you that in a nanosecond, is larger than we've seen in previous periods of the same duration. But it has just not even made a dent in some communities. That's the magnitude of the problem. We can't fix it overnight, We need a 4-year plan, and that's why I believe that this election will allow the incoming government to be stable and to focus on these challenges, working with all of the members of UBCM to get these jobs done.
Thank you for that, Premier. So while local governments have focused on responding to COVID-19 pandemic, we haven't lost sight of the climate emergency. At Metro and most of the local governments are committed to becoming a carbon neutral local communities by 2050 and are accelerating actions to adapt to climate change and reduce GHG emissions. COVID-19 has emphasized something we already knew. Spending time in nature is an effective way to reduce stress and support physical and mental well-being. Our regional parks and local parks are more popular than ever. While we aim to build back better by ensuring infrastructure, we need for healthy communities is in place. Co-investment and by other orders of government is the key priority to protect sensitive ecosystems and develop and deployment, improve deployment from the pressures of that we face every day. Now, a question to you is, in your new government, if elected, would you partner with local governments to expand and acquire parkland and ecological reserve throughout the province?
Well, yes, I absolutely would commit to that. We've been doing that all along. I've worked in my own area in Langford, Juan de Fuca, to work with the Nature Conservancy and others to assemble lands that were in private hands, that were the highest and best use was not more housing, but was to be secured for all time as green space in communities. So again, partnering to help you shape your official community plans to fill in those areas where you need the help. I think that's an appropriate expenditure for a senior or another order of government. I also believe, and I touched upon this, that part of our recovery plan, George Heyman, the minister, has been focused on this. We know that climate action is required. It's urgent and it's pressing. We worked with Dr. Weaver and his team and the Green Caucus to put in place Clean BC, the most forward-looking and aggressive climate action plan in North America. And it was, again, a collaboration of members of the legislature coming together, working with an advisory group that included members of UBCM and others, stakeholders in the community, to put in place that plan. But part and parcel of that was not just emission reduction. It wasn't just ensuring that our buildings were cleaner and greener, and that we were building the public infrastructure for transit that we needed to reduce single occupancy vehicles, and containing also our industrial emissions in a way that kept us competitive in the global marketplace, which we need to be, but also demonstrated that you can reduce your emissions and still be full participants in an industrial economy. And we've been, I think, absolutely successful in achieving that over the past number of years. We have much more work to do. But when it comes to those green spaces, those special areas, I know in my constituency, it's not just the provincial parks, which are numerous, but it's also those local parks that I like to go to. Langford is creating parks to go with all of the housing that's being built. Whenever Mayor Young and his council are looking at a significant development, they always make sure that there's a connection to new bikeways, new pathways surrounding our lakes in my community, Langford Lake, Glen Lake, Florence Lake, with the infrastructure that will allow people to access these extraordinary places, to get that reprieve from the daily grind of our workplaces, our businesses, and our families in some cases. So that's the importance of having this infrastructure and having these green spaces. And George Heyman has made that a key part of our restart plan. And we put significant investments into not just creating new trails and rehabilitating old ones, but also putting dollars in place to provide an opportunity to purchase those lands that are in private hands, and also to take the crown land that surrounds all of your communities and is in the heart of many of them, and making sure that we can put those crown lands to the highest and best use, which is not always industrial development. It's not always housing. Quite often, it's, as you say, Sav, as a place of reprieve for people to get a moment to reflect on how fortunate we are to live in British Columbia.
Well, thank you very much, Premier, for those answers to these questions. They're very important to local governments. And as I said earlier, we find we have access to your minister, yourself, and other ministries, and we thank you for that. But there's a lot to be done, as we said, from local government's perspective. And now, particularly the economic recovery, job creation is important to us. So I gather we're going to run out of time soon, but I will give you the last few minutes for your closing comments on this. I imagine we got about 4 or 5 minutes left. So please wrap it up. And I just want to say before I give you that floor, so thank you very much for taking the time. And it's my honor to really be part of this this little roundtable we had. And I believe that is significant to us to see that local government have access to the government. So thank you for your time, Ian.
Well, thank you, Sab, and thank you, UBCM, for allowing me to participate this year in this format. I know the traditional speech tends to be filled with goodies and nuggets. That's been the tradition over the past number of decades. I believe that we've worked very hard, as I said, with other orders of government to make sure that we're putting in place plans to ensure that you are not left holding the bag for the services that your community depends upon. I'm very proud of the work that I've been able to do with my colleagues in the legislature of all parties. I called an election. I grappled with this decision. It did not come easily, but I firmly believe, knowing that the pandemic is not going away next month or into at the beginning of 2021, but will be with us for a long period of time. And the economic recovery will be not 6 months, 12 months, but a 4-year undertaking. I felt that it was important to get the politics behind us. Let's have a vigorous debate. Let's put ideas on the table. All of the parties will have an opportunity to engage with their citizens, admittedly in a different way than we've ever done before, but voting will be safe. Elections BC has done a fantastic job. They've been working on safe voting, not just for provincial elections, but a potential federal election, also a minority government in Ottawa, and by-elections that are going to be held. I want to acknowledge the passing of Paul McDonnell and Nick Volko in Burnaby, two personal friends of mine. Nick worked with my brother for decades, and I'm so proud of Nick stepping up, being the first of his family to ever contemplate public life. But there's 2 vacant seats because of those 2 stalwarts in Burnaby passing away, and there are other vacancies at municipal tables around the province. So we need to have a way forward for our voting, to keep our democracy live. If there ever is an essential service in our community, it's that. And Elections BC has done a great job for this provincial campaign. There will be more plexiglass than you can imagine in voting places. There's about a week worth of advanced voting days. Voting day is on a Saturday, so it'll likely be in schools across the province, but our kids and teachers will not be in the schools on a Saturday. And mail-in ballots will now, I think, become a significant fixture in our election processes. I'm advised that on the first day of accessibility or availability, over 20,000 ballots were requested, which is, I think, 3.5 times what the whole election of 2017 involved. So I think people are going to become quite accustomed and comfortable with voting by mail. And I think that if those of you are concerned about your well-being, you should not be. Go online, go to Elections BC. It takes about 3 minutes to request your ballot, and Elections BC will get it to you well in advance of the coming campaign. The campaign is about how we go forward together. I said at the beginning that I'm proud of my approach to working with municipalities, working with UBCM. I know that every journey begins by that first step, but it also begins by building relationships. My mom told me when I was very young that once you burn a bridge, you can never cross it again. And I've tried my level best to build relationships across the political divides we have in our province, to focus on the values that bring us all together. The issues will divide us. I know that, you know that. But the values that make us British Columbians, our commitment to each other, our commitment as elected representatives to our communities and the people that live there, is what separates us from the rest of the folks in our towns. There are lots of people that have ideas, and they're not shy about telling you about it. But I always am impressed when someone puts their name on a ballot and says, I'd like to represent the people in my community. So I lift my hands to all of the delegates at UBCM this year. I thank you for your contribution now and into the future. And I'm hopeful in another 30 days, I'll have the opportunity to continue working with you in the capacity that I have over the past number of years. Paishka OCM.